We turn to Luke chapter 17 and we see something there about the rapture. Luke chapter 17, verse 31 to 36. On that day, let not the one who is on the housetop, whose goods are in the house, go down to take them away. In other words, in the day when Jesus comes, speaking about verse 30, the day that the Son of Man is revealed, on the day the Son of Man comes, if you're on the roof of your house, make sure that your heart is not attached to something down on inside the house. That's the point. Now we need to understand this. Supposing you're on the roof of this building, or the roof of your house, let's say, and Jesus comes. I don't think any of us would want to go downstairs. We'd be ready to go, of course. All of us would be ready to go. Nobody would want to go downstairs. This world is a rotten place in any case. The point is not that. The point is that wherever you are, is there in your heart a string, or perhaps a rope, or a chain that ties you down to something on this earth that you value? Maybe some material thing, some job, something that you have got, which is valuable to you. Some gold, something. Your heart is tied to. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Even though your body is on the roof of the house, your heart is downstairs. That's the point. Because, he says, if you're like that, remember Lot's wife, verse 32. Lot's wife's body was outside Sodom, but her heart was in Sodom. That's the point. That our heart need not be where our body is. Our body can sit inside the church, and our heart may be out in Babylon. That's the point. I tell you, if you seek to save your life, you lose it. You keep his life in this world. I tell you on that night, verse 34, this is the rapture. Two will be in one bed. It doesn't mean two men, it means two human beings. Husband and wife, obviously. One will be taken because he was heavenly minded like Enoch, and the other, like Mrs. Enoch, will be left behind. Exactly like that. Exactly. One day, the husband is gone. He walked with God. He walked with God. That's something we need to think of. People may have thought he was cranky and crazy and a nut, got a screw loose or whatever they may say, but God had a different opinion and he just took it. Who was the other person taken up? Elijah. He was taken up also in a rapture. And one thing we can see similar about Enoch and Elijah, they both preached judgment against sin. And the world thought they were crazy. People opposed them. The prophets of Baal, the prophets of Babylon opposed them. But they walked with God, and God took them. Follow Enoch and follow Elijah, and then we'll be taken up like they were taken up. You know, that's something for us to think about. We can turn now to Genesis in chapter 5 again. Verse 25. Interesting that, as I said, Enoch spoke about the second coming of Christ. That's what we also speak about in the rapture. And he was raptured. It's a very beautiful picture of the church. 300 years of walking with God in the midst of a family life. Wonderful, wonderful example. Right at the beginning of Scripture. Not a man who built a city after his name or donated a fan or a chair, but one who walked with God. And Methuselah, verse 25, lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. Verse 26. Then Methuselah lived 782 years after he became the father of Lamech. And he had other sons and daughters, and all the days of Methuselah were 969 years. This was the man, we can say, he carried death in his name. What is his name? When he dies, the judgment will come. He had death in his name. Methuselah. And he was the man among all the children of Adam who lived the longest. What does that teach us? God's long suffering. Shall I let Methuselah die when he's 100? No. Give the world a little more time. 200? No, a little more time. 300? 400? 500? 600? 962. He's crossed his grandfather's age now. No, let him live a little longer. The fact that Methuselah lived longest is an indication of God's long suffering with a world that would not listen to Enoch's preaching of judgment, that would not believe what Enoch believed, that even though God placed a witness right in the midst of that ungodly generation who walked with God and prophesied judgment, they wouldn't listen. Yet God, in long suffering, made Methuselah live. They saw this fantastic thing happening of Enoch disappearing. They didn't know what happened. They couldn't find his body. I think they must have said some wild animal must have eaten, or they've always got some rational explanation for these things, the people in his day. They were not interested in hearing God. But God's long suffering carried on. Let me read a verse to you in the first epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verse 20. It says about those who were disobedient, when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah. Remember, of Methuselah's 969 years, 600 of those years Noah was alive. And the last 120 years of Methuselah's life, Noah was preaching. There's going to be a flood. There's going to be a flood. It'll come. It'll come. And it says here, the patience of God kept waiting. And the living proof of that patience was Methuselah. When he dies, the judgment will come. God allows him to live the longest of all human beings. That's the significance of Methuselah being the longest who ever lived. Now, Methuselah also had met Adam. Adam died when Methuselah was 243 years old. So you see, Methuselah also heard all about Adam. In fact, from creation to the flood, it stretches out between just two human beings, Adam and Methuselah. That's all. Between those two human beings, you reach the flood. Yeah. Now we come to verse 28. Methuselah had a son called Lamech. And Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. He called his name Noah. That was Enoch's great-grandson and Methuselah's grandson. And said, this one shall give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed. How did Lamech know that the Lord had cursed the ground? Because Adam had told that to Methuselah. And Methuselah had told that to Lamech, that when I was in Eden, God said the ground is cursed. It's exact quotation of what God said. These people knew. Adam told them everything. They all knew what happened in creation. They all knew about God. Then Lamech lived 595 years. And he died just 5 years before the flood. After he became the father of Noah. And he had other sons and daughters. And he was 777 when he died. And Noah was 500 years old. Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We read about Noah in the next chapter. What do we see in this chapter? One significant thing. And he died, 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 and he died. And then suddenly, all of a sudden, one man, he didn't die. He went up without dying. It's a wonderful chapter. I don't think there's another chapter in the Bible which is full of this phrase, and he died, and he died, and he died, and he died, and he died. In the middle of that, one chap goes up without dying. That is the church. In the midst of a world surrounded by death, our hope is to be taken up if we walk with God like Enoch.